This is a quick tutorial to talk about the new hair system. This upcoming hair system will be used to make future hair variations, but can also easily be used for anyone that wants to make their own hair. So in this video, I'll try to go through everything you should know to hopefully make the hair you want to make. So first, I have made this new collection called Example Hair. So first, you might wonder how it works. It uses Bezier curves. Now, don't let this fool you. It's quite simple. For example, if I grab this curve and copy it, you can see that it's quite easy to create a new part of the fringe. So for people who have used curves in the past, you might know that, there's handles you can grab to rotate or scale the curve transition between points. You can grab a handle and press E to make it longer. Now this looks like a wave. You can make it like that if you want. You can delete points. You can delete middle points if you want to simplify the curve. You can scale, rotate, right? So this is the gist of how you would want to pose hair curves. Now to go through the settings that you may see on the right, these settings will allow you to customize the hair. So first off, when you create a curve, you would, make a Bezier curve and then create a geometry nodes modifier and then select curve to hair. Right now there's 3 different ones. You would want to create a copy of one of those. If I select tail, for example, now the curve is using the same settings that I used on the tail. Might not look like it, but it is. If you want to make a copy for it to be its own hair, you have to click the little number 2 here because there's 2 objects using it. By doing this, it has now a number after the name, which means it's a unique object, and then you can change all the settings you want and it will be unique to this new curve you made. So once you have your curve, or you can use this one if you want, you need to select the scalp rest, which means it's the scalp that does not move. I have one in this file. It's called scalp rest geo. It was made specifically to be a copy of the scalp of the head that does not move. If I go in hair, scalp rest geo. So scalp rest is this geometry right here. And if you go into the object data property, it has the body UV. That's the name of the UVs that it has. You can see these are the UVs. It's important to have UVs and to have them go into a XY direction. This will become more obvious why later. So this is the name of the UVs on the scalp. This is the name that needs to be here. Scalp UV. This is important mainly for the color, but also a few settings. So please make sure that you select the correct name. Now you have mirror. This one mirrors, it looks a bit funny now, but here you have the axis. So right now I'm saying in the minus X direction. If you put it to 1 and then put it to minus Y, see, it's a bit funky, but that's the idea. Generally I don't use it, but if you have a symmetrical haircut, it might be nice to use. Child amount is the amount of curve that are generated. So if I reduce it, you see the higher I put it, the nicer it looks, the fuller it looks, but also the slower it will be, the more expensive on your computer it will be. C spread stands for child spread. It's how far the child curves are around the curve itself. Because if I turn it off, these are the curves that are being used to make the hair. You see the centers here, and the copies, the children, are spreading around it. They're scattered. And this is the distance. So if I put it up, you see what happened, right? The spread shape is an experimental feature. It's not complete yet, but it essentially will scale in X, Y, or Z the spread of your children. An example for this would be, and if I scale, okay, if this one stays to 1, but these go like this, you see a bit what I'm trying to do. This will be perfected in the future, hopefully. The point is to have spread shapes that look a bit more like a linear spread. Then you have resample. This one is a bit complicated to explain because what it does, it changes the number of points on your curve. The more points you have, the more taxing on your computer will be, but also the nicer shape you will have only for certain situations. Here right now, I don't necessarily need that many points because the curve is fairly simple. But if you have hair that is curling or winding or doing a lot of back and forth curving, you need more points to have your curve follow that shape. It will be more explicit later when we see other settings. So stray, what stray does, it adds stray hair. So if I change the distance, you can see these hair that are not quite following the shape of the main clump. These are strays. You can see those ones floating here. And naturally, this is an on-off. This is the amount of strays. This is the distance. So experiment at your leisure. Then you have trim, which does exactly what you think it does. It takes your curve and just cut along. Well, not quite a cut, but it makes your hair shorter. This option might be case sensitive. You might never use it, but it's there if you need it. Length variance, if it's at 1, all the hair have the exact same length. If you lower it, you can see part of the hair are not as long as the longest hair. This is to give variation, like I said earlier. At 1, they're going to be the same length. So next you have curl. Now this might look crazy, but you can tell what it's trying to do. You have the radius that you can lower to make tighter curls. And they will follow the direction of your curve. So this is how that works. Curl amount is how many times it rotates on itself. Now you see how pointy and jagged this curl looks. This is what resample is here for. So resample right now is set at 0.02. So this unit is like saying that every 2 centimeters there's a point. So if you make it lower, there's more points, and now you see the curve is smoother. Now be careful. This setting can easily make your entire computer freeze or your application crash. So save before using it, because this setting is very stable, but what it does, it creates more points. And if you go and change too fast, you might end up with an enormous amount of points because this progression is exponential. You might end up with a few million, trillion points, and this is just not something your computer might be able to handle. I have capped this value to a minimum of 2 millimeters. This is as much as what my computer can take. You see I have almost a million point only on this hair, so please understand, use this sparingly. Now, a bit similar to curl, this is frizz. You can see a bit what it does. It just makes your hair a bit jagged. This will also take advantage of the resampling. Now, thickness, yeah, you can see a bit what it does. By default, I set it to a pretty low value, but not too low because then your hair becomes ghostly. So experiment at your leisure. This is there for that. Then you have tip thickness. Okay, if you put the tip thickness at 1, the tip will be as thick as the root of the hair, but you see the look that it gives you. You would want that if you want to show hair that has been cut in the middle with scissors. This is the type of look this is meant to evoke. At 0, it's thinner. So material tells the hair which material you're going to be using for the color. So this one is pretty straightforward, right? So you will want to use the material you made for this hair. In this example, I have made a shader specifically for this example, and I will go over it later. For now, I will go through the actual setup itself. So you might be intimidated by looking at this. The good news is you don't have to do anything here. All the settings you need to use have been exposed in the menu to your right. The only thing you might want to change is inside this red box that I have colored so. And the only thing in question is this curve here. If you change it, it changes how your hair clumps together. So at your left is the root, at your right is the tip. So how closely do they clump together? If I do this, you can kind of see what's happening, right? So this, for example, on the tail, I have used this to make the tip here that attaches to the body smaller. I could have made it even smaller if I wanted. So this is how that works. So once you're happy with your hair, there are a few things you can do with the example shader I have provided. Keep in mind that this is full of building blocks that you do not have to use. You can connect, disconnect different parts as you see fit. For example, there is a texture node here that has a custom texture that you can naturally paint on. So if I select a random color, see, but keep in mind this follows the UV you have set here. So, maybe don't go crazy, or you might need to have the template of the UVs while you're painting. But this is how this works. So please keep that in mind. So if I come back to the original mix, if I disable this for now, so there's a few things you will need to know. So if you remember the hair menu, at the very end, if you create a new hair, you will need to make sure that these names are typed correctly here. They do not have to be named this, but they need to be named consistently across your shader geometry nodes. So I'll explain real quick what this is. Your UV will be output with the name UV in all caps. This is case sensitive because in the shader here, your texture uses the UV attribute and it needs to be typed exactly the same as you typed here. Otherwise, it will not recognize it. The rest here work the same way. They are case sensitive. Curve factor is a value from 0 to 1 from the root to the tip. This is useful for stuff like, well, okay, if I re-enable this, for stuff like this, where it goes up and down the hair. So this is the factor. Now you have those values called root x, root y. How they work is that it is on the UV of the scalp, it's the X and Y position on the UV. So how this is used, for example, here I have root X called root X in lowercase. You type it in an attribute and you plug it's a float value, so you plug the factor. And then I'm sorry, this is math. If you don't understand, it's fine. You can keep the notes I made. If you do understand, you might see how powerful this can get. So if I set it to 1, so on the x-axis, so from left to right on the scalp UV, there is a gradient that goes from 0 to 1, which is this gradient here. But then if you had a modulo set to 2, what it tells the value here is if any point from left to right, if the value is cleanly divisible by 2, you output 1. If it's not cleanly divisible by 2, you output 0. Or I think it's the opposite. I don't know. Don't quote me on this. This is how it works. So this is a complicated way of saying if it's an even number, it's 1. If it's not an even number, it's 0. So if you multiply the value, you get more strands in the x-axis. This is how that works. And then you have a ramp that you can edit, change the colors if you want. This is how that works. So now you remember the factor. I have a ramp here that allows me to change how much of the hair gets overridden by this color. And this color can be whatever you want. So feel free to play with that. And this network is made only for me to show you all of these combined together. You can enable, disable, change the way they're wired. And naturally everything gets plugged back into a Pony main group, which is the same group that is used on the main hair. So you need to have this configured like this. The first input into a cycles output, the second output into an EV output. So now that you're happy with your hair, you want to rig it so that it follows animation. Here I have an example of what that might look like when you're done. You have hair that follows these bones. But more importantly, it follows the rig. So how do you make that happen? So first of all, there's no automatic way to do this, but we can get pretty close. So let's say you want to rig the back of the head. So what you will want to do is select your collection so that when you create a plane, it goes inside of it. That's just for convenience. Delete all the vertex because you won't need them. Name this something you'll remember. In my case, example main geo. And then what you want to do is add a geometry nodes modifier and find hair to mesh proxy. Now you don't need to worry about any of this. All you need to do is find your main. So example main. Now it's going to create this blob. And this is what you're going to use to rig. So in my case, I'm done with this, apply. And now I have this geo. And what you're going to want to do is rig that geo. So there's no easy way. You have to create bones. and then you have to parent to the rig, give weights, and then it's going to animate. So when you're done, it's going to look something, I'll show what I did with the fringe. It's going to look something like this. If I bring back the armature, so there's no easy automatic way around this. You can assign weights automatically and it can get some pretty nice results, but it's up to you. So once you have this shape rigged, another thing you might want to do is take the first bone that's supposed to be attached to the head, create a child of constraint, and select a bone from the original rig. In this case, it's pony armature. RG head is the head bone, so it follows the head. If it would be the tail, it should be the RG pelvis. So yeah, this is a bit more for advanced users, but keep in mind there's no easy way around this. But with this, it's going to follow the main rig. But we're not done yet. So once you have your bones, you have this mesh rigged, you can hide it for now. Go back on your original hair and create a mesh deform modifier. It's this one. And select the object you created. In my case, it was this one. Select that mesh. I set the precision to 3 because I don't think I need that much precision in my case here. And then you press, actually I can do it right now. You press, so you select, in my case it was example fringe rig, set it to 3, bind. You're gonna have to wait for a bit, depending on your computer. It might be slow because it's attaching all the points to the mesh you made. And now you can understand a bit what it does. So when you move this makes this move, it's going to follow the mesh. So this is how rigging the hair works. Hey there, it's me from the future. After testing the rig system for the hair, I found out that while it does work like a charm, it makes your file size grow an unacceptable amount. So the strategy going forward might be that the hair will not be attached to the rig, but you can at any time press this button, the bind button, which will attach it to the rig. Do this before animating the hair, and your animation will be preserved on the bones. And when you're done, before saving, unbind them. This way, your file size will stay small, and before rendering, you can bind them again. So you do it for each hair. Here, for example, I put precision 5 because then it captures the tip better. So yeah, I just wanted to say this is a current limitation. In the future, I will have a way to use the same curves, but instead of making hair, we'll make geometry that cheats the look of hair, and that might be lighter for rigging. So just wanted to interject with that. Thanks. Again, this is an example of if you're not too keen on animating, you can just make hair, but you won't be able to pose it. If you want to pose it, feel free to join the Discord, talk to the other people, and me included. We're going to be able to help you. But you could also just familiarize yourself with Blender, learn a bit of rigging, nothing too complicated. Obviously, this is very simple. And with this knowledge in this video, you'll be able to rig your hair, no problem. So hopefully this is a thorough enough explanation of how the hair works. Everything else, when it comes to styling the hair, for example, it's a different can of worm than just making hair, right? Because in my case, if you see the logic is that I'm layering 2 layers. So there's the layer that's on top, the layer that's underneath, so it gives volume. I make this little strand curve around like this. It's a bit more stylish. But then we're getting into character design, and it's up to you to figure out what you want to do. The main point of this system is to easily allow people to make hair. So hopefully this achieves that goal. And I can't wait to see all your creations. And don't worry, I'll keep updating this as more development comes in the future. So have a good one.